Hi, for those of you who've just joined us, we will be starting the program in 5 minutes' time. So, at the moment, while you listen to the music, do feel free to look at the running slides of our upcoming events and promotion. Thank you. Hi, everyone. For those who have just joined us, we will be starting in a few minutes' time. So, do feel free to look at our upcoming events and club promotions that is running and enjoy the background music. Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Emmanuel, Events Executive of NTU Alumni Club. and we thank everyone for joining us for tonight's webinar. And before I pass the screen to Abby, just a few quick housekeepings. All the mics will be muted during the presentation. If you wish to ask a question, you may do so by putting it up at a chat box. Also, just to let everyone know that photos and videos will be taken during this program. So if you wish to let us remove your photos or image out of any publication materials, do let us know. And lastly, as you can see on the running slides earlier, we'll be conducting a simple contest. So do stay until the end of the program if you wish to participate. Okay, tonight's speaker, Mr. Abi Dabas, is the CEO of Key Technologies that runs fintech platforms WoofPay and WebPuppies, a leading digital transformation company in South Asia. Abby is also a mentor to multiple startups and a regular trainer at leading universities and has trained more than 1,000 budding entrepreneurs. So without further ado, pass it over to Abby.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope you can hear me clearly. And we'll just share the slides. Okay, I hope you can see the slides clearly. So, I mean, we'll keep this session very interactive. At any point of time, if you have any questions, just send a message on the chat box. Just to let you know, I mean, before I start, I'm not a designer, right? So, I mean, in the sense that if you came in with some reservations about the fact that I'm not a designer, how am I supposed to do this? Then it doesn't matter, right? So, in the sense that if you are entrepreneurs, if you're looking to, build your own application, whether it's a web application or a mobile application, or in some cases both, then these are some of the, things that I've found useful. So I'll be sharing a bit more about some of these things. And the second thing is, like I was telling earlier, that this is I usually do an 8-hour program. So I've tried to keep some relevant information from an 8-hour program, and we'll try to squeeze in as much as possible in 90 minutes. So yeah, let's keep it interactive. I may go through some portions quickly. Towards the end of it, we'll sort of try to evaluate some of the applications that we use on a regular basis. So I would like, for you to participate a bit more, but I'll sort of at least take you through some, elementary basic things, which I think would be good to cover in any case. So yeah, if you have any questions at any point of time, just feel free to, message on the chat. Okay. So, uh, yeah, I mean, the whole idea, and I'm sure one of the reasons you're here is the fact that, we live our lives through applications, whether they are mobile applications or web applications. And, we can't imagine our lives. Like, for instance, I'm one of those people definitely who cannot function without applications, right? So, for instance, if you look at this list, I probably use 6 of them on an everyday basis, or maybe 7. I think a lot of us do. And if imagine if you take some of these out, our life would be, a lot worse. So the idea is that we try to learn, what some of these applications are doing, and how do we make things different on a web application versus how do we make it different on a mobile application. So what we'll cover today is basically, what's UI, obviously what's UX. It's been, the most widely used words out there, but a lot of people still don't understand. I mean, and we don't really exactly know what they really mean. And we'll talk about user-centered design. We'll talk about bad versus good UX. We'll talk about the 10 usability principles, which gets slightly into the design kind of a domain, but I think would be helpful both from a web and mobile point of view. We will definitely compare web and mobile UI UX. We'll talk about the 5-star strategy for web user experience. That is something that you know uh, I have sort of arrived at after observing a lot of applications and web applications over the years. We'll talk about the essentials of mobile app user experience, and we'll touch upon. And normally for the 8-hour program, we actually get the users to work on some of these prototyping tools, and by the end of it, they are able to sort of create a some sort of a prototype. But I think we'll at least touch upon so that you can you know, just sort of try out some of these if you haven't already, right? So if you are a designer or if you are well versed with what UI UX is and whatever, please bear with me for the benefit of others. Let's just quickly talk through what it is. So basically, a UI is the point at which human users interact with a device, right? So it can be a website or an application. It could be a non-digital product also. And obviously, the most important thing to understand is that the goal of effective UI is to make the user's experience easy, intuitive, and requiring minimum effort. I mean, in fact, we are working on multiple applications right now. We, work on progressive web apps, which are like the all the rage right now. We are working on hybrid applications. We work on web applications. And the whole idea is as we refine the products, we just realize that, the effort required to sort of complete a certain task on the application becomes less and less. And that's usually a sign of, effective UI. Again, it could be in any format, right? If you go to McDonald's and you're ordering and you see what you see on your screen, that is also UI. You are using an app like Spotify, you will sort of judge how good or bad it is based on the UI first. I mean, the first impression. And sometimes with stunning UI as well, you will not like the app because the UX or the user experience is terrible, right? So, or whether it's any website or whether it's a social media platform, we do access UI on a very regular basis, maybe hundreds of times a day. So some UI types in the sense, what it can be. So one is form-based user interface, so where the user to enter data into a program or application, right? It'll give you limited choices. A graphical user interface, right, which could be a keyboard or a monitor. A menu-driven user interface, something that we use very, very frequently. And then the touch user interface. We spend most of our waking hours using this, and the voice user interface, which is becoming more and more sort of popular and with the likes of so many new tools. So these are some of the user interfaces, how we are interfacing with some of these applications that have become, a huge part of our lives. So coming to UX, what is UX? So user experience is the process of manipulating user behavior. Now, manipulating may sound like a terrible word, but the whole idea is, let's say we say guiding user behavior. So I love using the word guiding. I love using the word guided user journey, and we'll talk about user journey map a little later. But the idea is that we guide a user, right? And as we use more and more applications, we guide the user to act a certain way on our applications through usability, accessibility, and desirability. So that's very important. And I mean, one of the things that I would like to say about, UI, UX is it's not rocket science. It's one of those things. I mean, think of it, if you're an artist and you're, painting something, the actual act of painting may actually take maybe a day or 2 days or maybe a few hours. But you know how artists spend days and weeks and months in hibernation or in nature or in, you know, terrible conditions because they are finding that inspiration. So the UI UX process is all about what happens even before we start design. So have to understand what goes into that UI UX in itself. And as we'll go further and I'll show you some of the apps that we use all the time, you will realize that it's not complicated at all. But what is complicated is something that's not visible. What is complicated, I won't call it complicated, but what is challenging, what makes it a bit more exciting is the research that goes into it. And that's something that we'll touch upon. So, I mean, if you look at this, the images here, so that's somebody, you see the individual sort of images, so the parts where the design elements are, that's the interface, and the parts where you can see all the arrows going from point one to point B, that's the UX. And I mean, a good way to sort of highlight, the difference is the image to the bottom right, and you can see that, you have a beautiful pathway, with all the tiles and everything, but the user has actually taken a shortcut, which may not be even paved, but that's user experience. So that's the kind of, difference in the sense that user experience is the path that the user will take experiencing your product, and design is the aesthetics and how they will interact with the product. So again, I mean, I'll just share a few of these, to uh, sort of establish the difference if it needs any establishing. Is, we have content, right? In this case, the content is all the, raw food, or food that we might have purchased at the supermarket. And then, the way we present the food, right? That is UI. And that's how, you look at it, as they say, you first eat with your eyes. So the way the presentation is and the garnishing is, or whatever else it might be, that's UI. And the UX is where you are, right? What's the experience, right? So how did people speak with you when somebody came to take your order? Were they able to make recommendations when you ask, is, A better or B better? Was their response, well, I'm not sure? Or was their response, let me go check with the chef? Or did they actually make some, recommendation that turned out to be quite good? And of course, the music, like Emmanuel was playing wonderful music right now, that's user experience. So, a glass of whatever the drink might be, that's user experience. So again, it doesn't get simpler than this. The way the bottle looks is UI, and the way you use it is UX, right? So uh, don't worry, there are not 50 slides, but I did want to make a difference because they are used very interchangeably, right? And we work with designers who are doing this for many years. Sometimes they can't understand the difference between what UI is and what UX is and where to draw the line. Not that you have to draw the line, but when we talk about it, when we try and build a product, or when we sort of critique a product, when we look at a product and we say, well, I didn't quite enjoy using it, sometimes the answer may lie in the UI and sometimes the answer may lie in the UX. So, just for us to, know this a bit better. So, there are some things that go into the user interface, like the layout, the visual design, the branding, the interactive design, and then the storytelling aspect of it, the engagement. What are the objectives, what is the usability? Those are the kind of things that go into the user experience, especially when it comes to a digital product, whether it's a web application, a mobile application, or it could be even a customized software. So the bad user interface will lead to bad user experience, and vice versa, right? I mean, if you have terrible user experience, it won't really lead to a bad UI, but the fact is it won't really work, right? In the sense, so both are needed. In the sense, people will not be able to, if you have bad user experience, people will not be able to discover your UI, right? So if, let's say, you're building a mobile application and there are some elements which are hidden, it's not intuitive enough. If the user is not able to go from point A to point B seamlessly, they are struggling to figure out what happens. So we are working with a company which does crowdfunding and crowd lending. And one of the first things that we recommended when we were revamping their mobile application and the web application is, the current applications are not intuitive. And the fact that the most important things were hidden on the website and on the app, and the most irrelevant things, which were probably relevant to two people in 2017, were highlighted all the time. So that leads to bad user experience. And then you had some visually stunning pages inside, but the user never got there. So, I mean, both of them equally impact the other, but, I'll just share some examples, right? So this is, in terms of the user interface, is not going to work out, right? So that's why if you see, and these are things, these are actual products, right? These are not morphed images or anything. These are actual products, and you will see how these products, we use Microsoft Word, we use a lot of, these products, and over the years they've become better. The UI has evolved, the UX has evolved. I mean, you look at some of these websites, they have the same amount of information, but just see how websites were a few years back, and now things have changed. So the user interface has changed. You look back, at sites from 5 years, 7 years, 10 years back, and you would realize how UI has evolved so much, right? And UI also evolves, as the number of users grows and as the users' requirements change, right? So in the sense that we are all evolving, and as we are consuming more and more content, the way content was presented to us, it cannot be, presented to us forever, right? We are evolving. We need to probably spend the least amount of time to figure out, and remember what we talked about earlier, the least amount of effort, So it has to be made available, very easily. So I mean, if you look at the earlier version of Facebook when it was called the Facebook, and how Facebook has evolved over the years, right? So, and I'm purely talking about a UI perspective. I'm not talking about data. Let's not go there. Uh, but the whole idea is, how Facebook has evolved. If you can see, things have changed, looks a lot more seamless now. And again, some of these things can be subjective. You may say, oh, I prefer the earlier UI, and it happens. So if you see that a lot of mobile applications, when they have a new version and a new UI, they let you choose. They let you choose between, which one you want to work with. So, if you go into the settings, you can actually select whether you want to use the new look and feel, the new UI, or you are happy with the older one. Eventually, they'll transition, but they don't want to lose users by, sort of forcing it upon us, right? So there are so many applications. Sometimes there are, internet banking applications. You think everything's working wonderfully well, and suddenly they'll make some changes, and it becomes really, really challenging to, maneuver that. So it could be a function of UI, but mostly it's a function of UX. Now, again, examples of how the user experience, and again, in line with user interface. So Google will make sure you know uh, it sort of guides you, it prompts you, it prevents you from making mistakes. So if you say something like please find attached, and then you don't attach the file, Google will prompt you. Now that's user experience. It's like somebody understanding you really well. As an application, is that something that they were always doing? No, but that's something that they have evolved to. So the fact that if you are sharing a Google Drive with somebody, they will make sure that they'll prompt you. They'll prompt you to do the right thing. They'll prompt you to turn on link sharing and things like that. And Google's, a lot of Google products are actually pretty good that way. If you look at the maps, for instance, you'll see how easy it is for you to figure out what's happening. This tells you how you're going to get there, but it also tells you a step by step way of getting there as well. So, again, a good example of rather good UI and a good UX as well. So eventually, if we talk about UI UX, the most important thing is this, what you see on your screens right now. It's all about placing the user at the center of everything, right? It's not about subjective. I like this look and feel. I like the color, green. I like the color pink. It's not about that. It's just about the fact that we have to understand who the users are and how the users are going to react and engage with our digital product. So that is very, very important. And in order for us to have, the whole idea, when we say UI and UX, the U is the user. And you'd be surprised that, we work with so many companies across the world, different sectors. And you look at it, and, there are, and obviously I won't name companies, but you would realize that the concept of building any digital product is all about the company sharing one way communication, message from the CEO, message from the chairman, message from somebody else, our vision, our history. There's so many things. So we were working with a company recently, and we looked at their digital presence, and our first reaction was nobody cares. Nobody cares, what somebody has to say. And I'm not saying, oh, that somebody who's the chairman of that company is not important enough and we should not listen to that person. That's not the point. The point is, imagine if you go to the Apple website and you hear what Tim Cook has to say about how he started his journey. Now, you may be interested in that, but you did not go to that website to hear about his life story. So there is a time and place for everything. And that is one of the reasons. In fact, the other thing I can sort of share here is the fact that the, if you observe and if you sort of, do some research on this, there is a reason why aggregator sites, marketplaces have a much better track record than corporates trying to do their own e-commerce, for instance. You look at so many sites, I can give you so many examples of, companies that have tried. I mean, when was the last time you bought shoes from the manufacturer's website? And a lot of them would be selling shoes on their website. But no, you would most likely buy from an aggregator website. When was the last time you went to a designer's website to buy something? When was the last time you even went to a company that sells printing supplies? Did you go to their website and buy a printer or a cartridge or anything else? You would probably most likely go to an aggregator website. And the reason is not marketing. The reason, because these companies that we are talking about, some of them are multi-billion-dollar companies. Yes, they can spend a few $1 million in marketing and make sure that you view their ads all the time and you click on them and you can go and buy. The reason aggregator sites or aggregator apps are so popular is because of the user experience. Because if you go, and I have seen a lot of them, and we have consulted a number of them, and we have worked with a few of them as well. If you go to the corporate site which is selling products, for instance, you will see there'll be an about us section. There will be a section about you know what the company does, physical locations, contact, and then there will be a tab which will say shop. And the point is, then you will first have to find whether the shop exists or not. So first you will just assume this website does not sell any products or services. It's just a corporate website. So then you click on that shop. If you find it, then it opens a page, and then the product segmentation is wrong, and then there are not that many products. It will not tell you what other products you may like. The experience is hugely different, so you will not end up buying products from that site or from that app. So, which is one of the reasons, like there are so many. If we take example of streaming services, right? I mean, you look at so many companies have tried their own streaming services, right? Big content creators, they've tried their own streaming services, but none of them come close to a Netflix. And the reason for that is the user experience. Of course, there's a UI element to that, but eventually it's the user experience. So when we build an application, whether it's a web application or a mobile application or any digital product, the most important thing is to keep the user at the center of everything. So when we are doing the process, when we are working on the UI UX design process, the first thing that we start off with is research. Now, obviously, the research that we are talking about is the user research. The research that we are talking about is what is the strategic objective of that web application or a mobile application? Why are we even building that, right? So we were recently working with a company which had two different web applications. Now, one, they were selling some programs online, and the other one, was more of a, find more about us, buy our books and everything else, completely different brands. And our job was to combine the two. So it took us more than a month to combine the two, because all of the time went into the research. Like, why are we doing what we are doing? And then we came to the user personas, like who are the users who are going to come to this website and what are they going to do? And then once we have the user personas, we've identified who the users are, then we go to the user journey. Like, in the sense, once the user comes, what's the first thing that the user will do? What's the first thing that the user expects? Are we giving obvious information to somebody who already knows that information? Or if somebody does not know that information, have we just assumed that they know everything about our company, about our brand? So these are the things that we need to do. And when I say user persona, for most companies, for most brands, for most businesses, usually there are multiple user personas. So when you are building a web app or a mobile app, especially more in a web app's case, you have to make sure that you have to have different user journey maps for each of the user groups. Then obviously you go into the wireframing, which is, you start creating what will happen where, and then you get into testing. And testing, uh, when I say testing, is again testing with the users. So for instance, I'll share an example. So we were building a software as a service application, and we worked very hard on it. The development was done. We were supposed to launch it on 15th of September 2020, and a week before, we looked at it, and you know we said, I felt there was something missing. So we actually got some actual users to use it, some business owners who were supposed to be, it was supposed to be for business owners to use that application. And we just realized that after step 3, they didn't know what to do. It wasn't intuitive enough. They could not figure out what they were supposed to do. Some messaging was confusing. they could not understand. So what was very, very clear in our minds about what we are trying to do, or we are doing something with data, we are also allowing them to do this or that, and we thought was an absolutely fabulous product. It probably still is, but the user experience was terrible. And so we had to go back to the drawing board. And that's a mistake that we made, that we started building an application based on our assumption of how these businesses would be and how these businesses would run. And obviously we did ask some of them a few things of what features they would like, but we did not at every step get them to test it and try it out. And which is always difficult. It's like, are you going to build it, are you going to design it, or are you going to get people to test it all the time? Because that does slow down your development process. But the point is, when you have your minimum viable product, or when you have your prototype ready, it's very, very essential that you get it tested by actual user groups, because otherwise, you launch with all the fanfare, and they will not accept it, right? They will not really be thrilled with your product, and then you have to go back to the drawing board in any case. So I mean, the process, again, has to be defined. We have to understand why we are building the product, right? So it's so important. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough, right? So if you look at, what is the problem, who has the problem, how will we solve the problem, and what will the solution achieve, you know each of these questions is very important, and we should know the answer, right? Because sometimes it feels like, are we over philosophizing? No, we are not. It's very, very important, because, like, for instance, if you are building a financial services app, what is the problem? The problem may be, the person has trouble getting, let's say, a loan from a bank. So we build a decentralized platform where it becomes slightly easier for them to get that loan. Or maybe it's an aggregator where they can get loans from different providers. Now, all that is great, but what will the solution achieve? Because the problem is, I have seen, and I, in fact, backed by a Fortune 500 company, a digital platform, and I met their CEO, and I thought, wow, that's a fabulous product. And then we were talking about how does a user actually then get this loan? And then he said, oh, then he has to go through this KYC process and that KYC process and whatever else. And we realized that actually the problem was not the user interface. If the user was going to the banks, if the user was speaking to his personal banker, or maybe just call on the bank hotline, it was a rather good experience. The challenge was the whole KYC process, and the way the KYC was conducted. And they built this absolutely beautiful fintech platform which could do disperse loans and do a lot of those things. You have a beautiful dashboard where you can go and see what's happening, how much are you paying in interest, how much are you paying in principal. All of those things are lovely, but the KYC process is rather painful. And now, if you see most of the apps, they will, if you use a lot of fintech apps, you would realize that how easy it is. You don't have to move away from your desk. And that's one of the best parts. You can start, you get a robo advisor app, you get an investment app, you get, one of those, transfer foreign exchange apps, you get an internet banking app. For most of these things, you do your KYC through my info. So and then obviously there will be some additional documents required. You do that. If you are in the enjoy dabbling in the cryptocurrency space, then you will realize that in the cryptocurrency space, a lot of apps will do sort of tiered KYC as well. So some of them would ask you to take a selfie next to your passport or some photo ID or something. But whatever else it is, and people may think it's rather bizarre, but you don't have to step away from your desk. So the experience has completely changed. And you could be investing and saving and cashing out and doing whatever by following a rather simple experience, the user experience. So it's important that we go through these exercises. We go through all of these exercises first to identify what the problem is, who has this problem, how will we solve this problem. And at any point, if you are not clear about that answer, just take a step back and maybe involve your co-founders or anybody else that you may be working with, and try and get those answers from them. So The next thing, I mean, once we've identified the problem, once we've identified what the like business objective is, we have to, again, this is the most important thing. I personally obsess over it. We talk about this with every organization. We are currently working with a non-profit, and we are talking about user journey, user journey, user journey. We work with some New York Times #1 bestseller. We talk about user journeys. We work with a pawn company and a fintech company, e-commerce company. We talk about user journeys. It's the most important thing. So we have to understand the user, and once we understand the user, we create user journey maps. Again, we talked about survey. We do a quantitative and qualitative survey. We obviously build the user personas for different user groups, very important. you know uh, On-site observations. We do influence map. I mean, I won't touch upon influence map and empathy maps and things like that today, but these are some things which are very important, and you can conduct user interviews. So user persona, it's a fictional representation of your customer user, right? So you need to know who your John Doe is, or Jane Doe is. You need to understand who they are. And again, I mean, that's a very interesting point that I talk about a lot, and I'm going to sort of sidetrack a bit. But one of the important things, that we realized is that this whole segmentation of users and user personas has completely changed. The way it was happening 10 years, 15 years back, and the way it's happening now is completely changed. So whereas everything was very demographic, like socioeconomic status, location, a lot of those factors, age group, right? So for instance, you would say 18 to 35 male, lives in a developed country, does this, the way the segmentation used to happen. Most evolved organizations are not following that approach anymore. And the reason for that is technology. I mean, one of the reasons for that is technology, because obviously, with technology making so many products so accessible to so many people, what happens is, let's say, a Netflix show, right? You could have an 85-year-old grandma, who absolutely loves that show in Ireland. And then you could have a 17-year-old boy in Vietnam who absolutely loves that show. So if you are a marketer and you plan to market something to, somebody, then all your assumptions about who your target group are absolutely pointless, because these are two people that you will never ever club together as part of the same target group. Right now, again, depending on what you're selling to them, if you're selling further content to them, then obviously they are part of the same target group. But if they're not, then if you're probably selling maybe fitness equipment, then they would still be different target groups. And again, and that's why all these apps are collecting so much important data about your preferences and what you like and your history, and so that they can recommend. So these are important things to understand also. Try and spend as much time as possible on understanding and identifying your user personas. Once you have those, you can start building the product, and then you can have user journeys. So for instance, from the home screen of the mobile app or the home page of a web app, that user A comes and this is the action that they perform. User B takes a little more time. I'll actually show you an example of that in a bit. So again, uh, it's important that we sort of uh, do as much detailing of user personas as possible. Again, some of these are relevant, some of these are not relevant. If your business is, let's say, based on location, yes, you need to still figure out where the location is. Depends on the product, depends on the service. But these are some of the highlights. I mean, some pointers that you can use and try to sort of detail it out as much as possible. So a user journey map is obviously, a timeline of all touch points between a user and a product. Like I've been saying, you need to understand from the time that the user arrives on the application to whatever action, the desired action is, their engagement throughout the process is basically a user journey map. It visualizes how a user interacts with the product, and it allows a designer or like a co-founder or a founder to see a product or a service from a user's point of view. It's very, very important. So, it's important when we are building a user journey map, to set clear objectives for the map. So I mean, what goals are you directing this map towards? Who is it for? Important to understand that. what experience is it based on, and you know, it may seem like a rather academic exercise, but it's not. And usually when we work on, applications, it takes 3 sessions. The first session is preparing these questions, right? So some of the questions that I shared earlier in terms of what is the problem, who is the problem, who is facing the problem, all those things. Who's the user? What is the user all about? What do you want the user to do? So it takes 3 sessions. So first you prepare that questionnaire, of all the questions that you think you don't have answers to, or even if you have answers to, you just get them down. The second thing is you do a working session with your team, right? All the people involved who understand the market, so whether it's your co-founder who's a marketing person, if you are the marketing person, then the technology person. If you have all the answers, the technology person has all the answers, then the UI UX person, whoever is doing the design. So everyone needs to be on the same page. So when we are working on a project, we after the second session, we have a very good idea of who the user is, what the user personas are, how many user groups are we targeting, right? There could be more than three, more than five. There could be 20 different sets of users. But you cannot build an application. I mean, I'm not saying you cannot, but you should not, or you would probably not build an application for 12 different user groups. It's going to be challenging. So you have to say who are the primary sort of user groups, and then maybe one or two secondary. So usually in our experience, we do user journey maps for about 2 to 3 personas. So the primary user groups who will come drive the revenue, who will come and purchase and everything. People who found you already, people who are probably a part of the loyalty program, people who are repeat visitors. So they will have a completely different journey from a user which is basically coming and exploring a bit more about your organization. They may just simply want to get more content. They may want to watch some videos. They may want to do something else. So all these things basically would define their user journey. And then there could be the third ones who are probably not your customers today, but like for instance, yeah, a lot of businesses that we work with, let's say if they are targeting ultra net worth, high net worth individuals, they know that some of the younger professionals may not be their user group, but they may be their user groups in a few years time. So they want to make sure that they come, they subscribe to the newsletter or something, they are a part of that ecosystem, and as and when they are ready, as and when they are ready to invest, then they move from being user group number 3 to user group number 1. So again, like I said, this is the way sort of it goes. Let's say customer type 1, user signs up, user goes through the onboarding, whatever, maybe abandons the tool, maybe whatever else. The amount of effort that e-commerce sites spent or e-commerce apps spent on cart abandonment is insane, right? So because it's a huge problem, so you will see a lot of apps will send you a notification saying your products are still in the bag, your food is in the basket, or whatever else it is, because cart abandonment is a huge issue. So in the sense, how do you make sure that the users are engaged? And so many applications. So one of the clients that we were working with, they had this issue that they had great traffic, they had great engagement, and people are interested in their products, but somehow at the time of checkout, people just abandon and they don't come back. And they came to us and they said, can we do something to improve it? And we really tried doing that, and we tried doing that, and then we realized that the challenge was basically that the payment process was not clear enough, and the payment gateway that they were using was not really ideal, and it wasn't a very seamless experience, and there was something that the users felt that this payment is not secure. And so that was the reason that people would come and not purchase the products. So what we recommended was change of payment gateways. We made it a much simpler sort of process. It looked like something very global, it looked like completely trustworthy, and then their abandonment rate went down significantly. So again, whatever your user may, you have to define what the desired actions are for your user group, and then finally you have to define their journeys. So the design process, again, if you have to break it down, it's research, design, and test. So what do I do? You understand the user, understand the goal, improve the process and flow, using data like we spoke about for a couple of apps. Make sure that the product that you are designing is user centered, and then of course assess and optimize. Now this is something that we found, we work with startups and we've realized that this is a step that a lot of them struggle with sometimes, because nobody wants to be too self-critical of themselves. So because as it's a challenging, as for some of you who may be involved with startups or running your own ventures, it's a tough job. It's not easy, and you put in all that effort, and when you're testing, sometimes we realize that founders don't want to handle that criticism positive. So they just say, oh no, these users don't get it, right? So for instance, there was a startup we were working with. They had a product, and the problem with their product was that it wasn't a plug and play model. That every time somebody shows interest, they had to do a demo, and then after the demo, still it wasn't a seamless process. Then they had to contact their tech support. Then they had to do, the startup had to do a fair bit of customization before the product could go live on their system, like the client system. And this process was so painful that one, two, three, four, five clients pointed that out, and the startup just did not want to believe it. And instead of optimizing that process, and I mean, of course, it's not like you flip a switch and the system is optimized, but the fact is that instead of trying to work on that system and making it as seamless as possible, they kept saying, oh, these are not the kind of companies we want to work with in any case. So let's work with bigger companies. We want to work with billion-dollar companies. And then the billion-dollar companies had even more requests from their system. So in that case, the customization for that software, all that software as a service that they were building, was even longer. And once they had a couple of those terrible experiences with the large companies, that was it. Because then that they didn't have any room to maneuver, because they had already tried, and those companies kind of gave up on them. The product had a lot of promise, but it was the user experience which was very, very painful. So it's important that we assess and we optimize, based on the assessment, based on the testing, we optimize that, and we can sort of improve the user experience. So, again, don't go from a problem to solution. You know, try to figure out, what's the persona, what are their problems, what is the objective, and then the solution, right? And then the strategy and the features will be a part of that process. So, this is something, uh, I would like to talk about, in the sense that it'll give you an idea of how you use a lot of these apps every day, and how these apps are implementing, at least the good ones are implementing these, quite seamlessly. And you obviously would have use them 1,000 times, but maybe or maybe not, we pay attention, or sometimes we don't, because it's just become a part of our lives. But when it comes to building our own apps, or when it comes to building our own products, we sometimes don't pay attention to these things. So I'll go one by one. So again, firstly, the visibility of system status. You know, the user should know what's going on inside the system, right? So in the sense, if you look at it in the sense, whether it's Google, whether it's any of the systems, right? So when we have the whole idea of, when you have any app, you have your own dashboard, you can go and check, because some apps make it very difficult. And one of the most annoying parts about a lot of these apps is that you can have limited functionalities on the apps, and I'm talking mostly mobile. But the fact is, you are not able to interact with the app. You have to go to the website, and you are not able to sort of load a number of very important features. So it's important that the user should be able to check what's happening on the app. It's and no matter what the app is, right? There could be multiple ways, and of course the progress. So for instance, whether it's an upload, if let's say it's an application, whether you've done KYC, it should tell you have reached step 2 of 3. It should not be you keep filling up forms and everything, and you don't know where you are in that whole process. And then of course you use visual elements. You have So there was an app that I was using, downloaded an American app, wanted to activate something, some financial services app. 14 days later, it's still not done, right? So for whatever reason, right? And I can't see the status. I can't see why it's not happening. I can't see what is going wrong. So finally, I had to go to the web and I had to tell them that, I'm having a terrible experience. And yeah, I mean, they replied, but by that time, 14 days later, in this day and age, I'm already prepared to delete the app. So the second thing is, a match between system and the real world, right? So for instance, it's important, that from visuals and like from your communication, your tonality, the language, it's important that you use, things that users are familiar with, right? So for instance, if you look at the call to action button here, it says, yes, I want Neil to teach me how to grow my business, right? So is very conversational. Again, it may be it's subjective whether you want to have such a long sentence or something, or you can say, yes, I want to learn, right? So if you see, these things have evolved over the last few years. It used to be very submit form, accept, or those kind of call to action, and now the call to action are very, very, conversational. And in fact, if you go to a lot of the software as a service apps, you will realize that the way they talk to you is like, oh, don't have this, no worries, come get started, we'll show you how to get it done. So it's not some, you know uh, statement from Victorian times of, this is what we do and this is how the app was built. It's conversational. Again, depends on the product. If it's healthcare, maybe, you won't want to get that conversational, or maybe if it's financial services or cybersecurity, maybe not, right? So I mean, that is something to sort of keep in mind, but keep it, again, based on who your user group is and what's the way they interact with the world. User control and freedom. This is all about, you know giving the user the freedom to navigate and perform actions, right? So for instance, every time, give them options, right? So for instance, can they undo, can they learn more? Don't just, our application should not just absolutely do something and then the user like, hey, but I didn't want that, right? So for instance, a lot of applications, if you're deleting something, will give you an option, will give you a prompt to say, are you sure you want to do that? Or it's if you made a mistake, and which users will. So make sure that, it's not like, there are apps which let you undo an action, go back to where you were. And those are, simple things, but they make all the difference. So consistency and standard. So for instance, if you have, especially on the mobile, is very, very important, and we'll talk about a bit more of this in detail later. But the fact is, you have to make sure that the same color schemes or the same kind of buttons and everything are followed across the app. It's not about, you have this orange submit button, but then later in the app you have a green button, or then it becomes circular, and then it's not a rectangular button. So there has to be consistency, because again, as we'll talk later, mobile apps especially are very low involvement products. So when I say low involvement, in the sense you're not very invested in them, you have not opened a laptop, you have not typed something, you're not looking at a screen. So it's just you've taken something out of your pocket and you're looking at this, okay, whatever. So you have to be prepared for the fact that, users will make mistakes, users will not be paying a lot of attention. So you have to make sure that you keep that consistency throughout your application. Error prevention, again, very important, because like for instance, if you make a mistake, does the app say that? Now obviously there are exceptions to that. Now if you go to a stock trading app, for instance, and let's say you want to invest in Alphabet shares, which was Google, and the stock code ticker is GOOG. Now if you type GOOV, then it should, in those cases, it should not be like, it should not autocorrect. Because if the app assumes that you're interested in GOOV or whatever, or it just assumes that, why would you invest in GOOV? You should invest in GOOG or whatever else it might be, and it allows you to execute that trade. Now that's a massive problem. So it's important that we know when we are doing what we are doing. But when it comes to, less sensitive applications, so if it's internet banking, no sort of if you are entering the name of your beneficiary, it should not just assume, it should not be predictive, it should not be, giving you suggestions, but otherwise it's very important. Like here you can see you made a typo, but the app has already figured out what you're looking for, and it'll just give you, a lot of options, so you don't have to then go back and make the, correction and then whatever, right? It would be not very good user experience. So again, this is very important, especially on mobile. Again, is recognition rather than recall, right? The minute you say something, the app should ideally understand what you're trying to say, right? It has to understand your intent. It should not be a function of, you have to type the whole thing, or if you made a mistake, you go back. So some predictive, some sort of recommendations, some recognition. So if you go to Google, for instance, and you search for, shoes, right? You say, you type shoes, and then 5 minutes later or 2 minutes later, you want to type ballet, the next word that they'll show is shoes. Now, obviously these things, enhance the user experience, and then the idea is to get the user to do as little as possible, as we sort of discussed at the start of the program. Flexibility and efficiency of use. So this is very important. Again, when I say flexibility and efficiency, is in the sense different users have different levels of understanding. So for instance, some people are very, like for instance, Zoom, for instance, right? Zoom is not making this mandatory for you to change your backdrop. Zoom is not asking you to do a number of things that some advanced users can do. So there are advanced settings. If you can go to video settings, you can go to audio settings, you can make changes to that. But for most people, if they are not quite prepared, or they don't quite understand, or if they are not as used to, some of these applications, they can still get started. So for instance, always give the option and flexibility to the users, and so that they can go and maybe click on the advanced settings, and or on mobile we'll show how they use the icons. Again, aesthetics and minimalist design. So it's extremely important. So again, this there could be some cultural differences here. I mean, as you can probably, you would have seen that in certain countries, they absolutely love, a screen full of like 40 different objects and everything. And that the concept of the page being very busy is perceived to be a wonderful thing. But in most sort of consumer cultures, less is more. And especially on mobile, less is definitely more. So, make sure that, it's only the important things that you want to highlight. So prioritization is very important. Again, coming back to user journey, if you look at it, so if you look at the image on the right, if the two desired actions are, find my space and contact us now, because those are the things that you would most likely do, then instead of, again, talking about all the other things that the company is doing, the founders of the company and whatever else, very cleverly, you know these are the things. If you look at some recruitment apps, for instance, they will make it very easier to submit the resume, or download the resume. If you're on the employer side of it, you can reject, you can accept. Dating apps, the same thing, less is more. If you look at the dating apps from 5 years back or 7 years back, and if you look at the dating apps for today, less is more. All you have is an image, some short description, and if you look at it, even the short description has been made easy on a lot of apps by pre-existing text. You tap tap tap, that's the app pretty much defines you. People use emojis, and then what does the user have to do? Go right, go left, easy enough. Whereas dating apps or dating sites from 10 years back would make you write an essay about who you are, what your passions are, whatever else it might be, for, accurately or not, inaccurately. The whole idea is now it's intuitive. It lets you do as little as possible, and still you have a wonderful experience, right? Because you feel that everything is captured, but without you having to make that effort. So then the other thing is, helping users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. As you can see, a lot of the things that I spoke about are about, making sure that, we are prepared for errors or incorrect actions or something else, right? Because that is going to happen, that is going to happen. And our job is to not make it difficult, right? So some apps will not tell you. So for instance, if you look at the image on the left hand side, you will see that, if you enter something wrong, you'll realize that some applications do not highlight the section that you made the mistake in. So you are just looking at it again and again, but you say, but I think I did everything right. But no, you did not. But the point is, if you filled out 42 fields, and if it does not very clearly say what was the mistake, then you will have to do a lot of those things again. Or sometimes they will highlight five things. Or even if they highlight, they don't tell you why they've highlighted. Is it, did you use a special character? Was a special character not allowed? Should you not have used, a colon or a hyphen or something else, or a, hash or whatever else it might be? So it's important to tell the user, what mistake they've made. And, once you let them know what they've made, or even if you cannot go forward as a product, then you have to make sure that you give them an alternate way of doing the same thing. Otherwise, what will happen? People come to your app, you spend money, you have a cost per acquisition. People come to your application, they are not happy, they could not figure something out, they just go back, they'll never come back. you know Very good chances they won't. And finally, help and documentation again depends on which app it is. But it's important that users who need some help, without they can they can get all the information that they need without any serious documentation or training, right? But if they do need it, they should, right? So for instance, I'll give you an example of how many times have you tried to delete an app or an account from an app, and they make it so terribly difficult, right? And for whatever reasons, I can't say for very noble reasons, but a lot of apps make it very difficult for you to delete your account. And most of us are rather uncomfortable that if I don't use an app, that my account stays there forever, whether it's a social network, whether it's anything else, whether it's a recruitment site, whether it's a dating site, it could be anything. Now, you will see that some apps allow you to do that rather easily. And if they don't, a lot of them will make you go to their website, which I'm sure that is something that can very easily be fixed. And they obviously don't want to do it. They want you to take that extra step that, who's going to bother, right? I mean, why would I go to the website and everything, right? So, but a lot of the good apps, and you would realize that if you delete that app, right? So for instance, the financial services app, right, it just allows you to completely delete your account, everything, all the documents are gone. So for instance, I remember I deleted an app, a financial services app, and it came back with a notification saying, all your data will be destroyed within 7 business days. And I felt really good about it, right? Because I was wondering, even if I delete the app, but I've done so much, KYC, I've done all of that, and it was an app, which was based locally. It was, halfway around the world, and I wasn't so sure. So it's important that, help is available. Now, help can be made available just through a simple icon where people can, find something. And if your app does not allow for it, or if your product is rather complicated, then make sure that you make it available on your web application or mobile application. Again, it's a matter of preference. I would prefer and I would recommend that your app should be able to do at least 95% of the things, the mobile app, if not 100%. And especially when it comes to very you know essential features about creating an account, deleting an account, changing an email address, you should not get your user to go to your website or web application to do that. So these are some of the things that are quite important. In some cases more relevant for web applications, some cases more relevant for mobile applications. So when you're building an app, like I said, just a quick recap, make sure that you understand the user, you understand the problem, you understand how your solution is going to solve their problem. Then you create the user personas, you create the user journey map, you do the wireframing, you have like the prototype ready. Then you definitely make sure that you go out there and test with the actual users, in terms of using the right language, in terms of making sure that you are prepared for errors, in terms of taking the wrong actions. You give the users the flexibility, a lot of things that we spoke about. So just make sure you know that it's an easy process, it's a seamless process for the user when they are interacting with your application. So now this is an interesting image, and I kind of find it very interesting. And now we will sort of talk about a bit about the difference between web and mobile. And so, if you would mind, I mean, if you don't mind, if I would like to hear your thoughts, and maybe you can just, I mean, feel free if you want, mic on and say it if you like, or if you want, you can just message on the chat. What do you think if, let's say, an image represents uh, one image represents a web application and one image represents mobile application for whatever reason. I mean, I don't want to sound like an artist because I'm not. What do you think? I mean, it's a completely different experience. I mean, as you can see. So, what's your first reaction? There's probably no right or wrong answer, but what do you think? I mean, feel free to turn on your mic if you want, or if you want to message something in the chat. Which one is a mobile app and which one is a web app? What do you think? I mean, feel free to turn on your mic if you can. I'm not sure if you can. Um, just try to see. Okay, I'm having a bit of a challenge accessing chat. Never mind. Um, okay, I'll tell you, and we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this, and when we do a bit of Q&A in about 15 minutes time. So, I mean, the answer is, and it's a bit of a trick question, is the fact that if you look at you know the image on the left, you see that there is a lot happening, right? So your first reaction probably would be maybe it's a web application. And the reason I say that is because on a web application you can have a lot of content, right? So you just see a lot of content there, whereas on a mobile application, because of the screen size and because of low involvement, you probably spend you know time focusing on one activity only, right? But you can flip that argument and you can say, if you look at what's happening on the left, it's actually a speed dating event. So you are technically only spending time on one activity at a time, but there is a lot of content on the app. So if you look at it that way, then the one on the left is actually a mobile app, and the one on the right can be a web app, because a web application will give you a much deeper experience, in the sense that you can have a lot more time. There's more time for storytelling. There's a lot more time for you to actually experience something on a web application as compared to a mobile application, in most cases, not in all cases. So it's actually, I find these two images quite interesting because, they can be perceived as either. But what is the primary difference between, web and mobile? I'll talk about it in a bit. And so web applications, allow you to have bit more of a storytelling. It's a completely different user experience. And again, there are different kinds of applications, and obviously it's not relevant for all of them, but it does allow you to have a much better storytelling or a completely different approach. So this is something that I believe, especially if it's a consumer brand, or if it's something that you're trying to do, not necessarily a consumer brand actually, but the fact is, if you are trying to engage your users on the web, I really do believe that there is five elements to that, right? And this is something that, again, I'm not saying this is an exhaustive list, I'm not saying this is the only list, or this is whatever. These are my observations over the years, based on what I feel is a great way for when the user comes to your website or web application, and to the point they exit, then this is the strategy employed by a lot of organizations globally. So, what are the 5 stars? The first one is evoke emotion. The second one is you highlight your strength through statistics. Number three is provide evidence of your greatness. Number four, offer something useful to your customer. And number five is conversion. So how it goes, and don't worry if I went too fast, because we'll go through each one of these one by one. So if you look at it, the first step is evoking an emotion. Now you look at this, one of the world's most recognizable consumer brands. And you go to your website, and that's the image that you see, right? You can go and check out countless websites and web applications, and you would realize that none of them really talk about their products, because the first thing that they want you to do is establish the brand promise, sort of relate to the brand. And here they are evoking an emotion. What emotion are they evoking? Happiness, joy, togetherness, friendship. I mean, friendship's not an emotion, but you get the idea, right? So that's the first thing. I mean, you don't see the product anywhere other than, you know, it's just a part of their happy lives, right? This, again, a completely different category, so you can, do a lot of things here. You can see, as you can see, the call to actions. You can join, you can act, where, which could involve multiple things. You can partner, you can comment. So they have everything going, right? There's a lot of serious business going on. But what's the first thing that you see? You see an emotion being evoked. And what is that emotion? Again, a lot of people say happiness. But, I when I look at it, I my first reaction is hope, because the whole idea is the fact that if you are, providing this aid, or if you are partnering with them, you know, then that's the joy that you bring, and that gives you a lot of hope as a human being. You look at, again, these are iconic brands. If you look at it, it doesn't get simpler than this. So if you look at it, there are shopping tools, there's clothing and gear that you can buy, parts and accessories. You can do a lot of things like any web application should do. But the fact is, what's the first thing that you see? You see a video, and it's all about freedom. So that's the emotion that is evoked, right? Then you have trust, right? That's the first thing. Nobody talks about. It's not about global network. It's not about the world's largest bank, which it is. The fact is, the first thing that they talk about is trust. So it's important, uh, that if we have a web application, for instance, that we try and evoke an emotion. The second step, the second star, if you want to call it, is numbers don't lie. Right now, look at this. This is a software as a service application. You know, you can go, you can, sign up for something. You can go check out their pricing, solutions, everything. But what's the first thing that they talk about? You know, the number of businesses of all sizes trust us. Numbers don't lie. Companies like to highlight their numbers. So when we talk about a user journey, the user comes, the first thing, in a lot of businesses, the emotion is evoked. Again, you'll see that not all stars happen in that sequence. So for instance, for a consumer brand, it's even more important to evoke an emotion. Now, for a brand like this, they don't want to evoke an emotion, but they would definitely use, the numbers, because it's all about the numbers. It's a B2B product. It's not a consumer brand. Nobody's buying shoes. It's not a fashion brand. It's not a lifestyle brand. Again, if you look at this, Statista being, the provider of statistics, globally, the point is you have to pay for a lot of these, statistics, and then people do question, oh, should I? Why should I? And then you see, oh, firstly, numbers, insights and facts across 600 industries and 50 plus countries, and you feel like, okay, well, I mean, if I'm paying, I do get a lot of numbers. I do get from a lot of industries and a lot of countries. HubSpot, one of the world's most popular CRM solutions. Again, you can log in, you can get HubSpot for free. You can go and choose your pricing plan. You can figure out how to sort of integrate HubSpot with your website and in your organization's ecosystem. But as you can see, a lot of numbers, right? Numbers build trust, right? And again, what better number than number one, right? So it's and these are very different companies doing very different things. And when you go, and before they get you into any sort of transactional engagement, the first thing that they do is either they are evoking an emotion, or they are highlighting their strength through numbers. Now, the other star that I like to talk about is don't tell me, show me, right? So for instance, what's the best way to show somebody something, right? So whether you're an F&B business, whether you're an application, where you're a financial services company, a lot of, globally, a lot of companies use, Yelp reviews, they use, Trustpilot reviews, Google reviews, Glassdoor reviews. There are all kinds of reviews. So again, don't tell me, show me, right? So I can say and I can scream from rooftops, I'm the best and the best and the best. But instead of me saying it, let your other users say, right? Like for instance, if you launch an application and you want others to, know how good it is, then let your other users, the satisfied users, the happy users, let them share that, right? So if you don't want to have reviews, then of course awards. Nothing like awards to say, well, we won so many awards. That speaks for itself. Then of course you can always say reviews from multiple countries, right? So for instance, not just one country. So that just builds a lot of trust as well. So then, so you've evoked an emotion. You've highlighted your strength through numbers. You have actually showed them through reviews, awards, whatever else it might be. But then we cannot get very self indulgent, right? Like we talked about, and everything has to be, user centric. So, how do we make it user centric? So, yeah, somebody comes to your website, somebody comes to your application, you quickly highlight your strength. You've launched a new product, you can say 50,000 users, you've evoked an emotion if it's a consumer brand or if it's doing something, you can say, serving the unbanked population in 11 countries or something or whatever else it is. You've evoked an emotion, you've highlighted your strength through numbers. You have actually used, other people's reviews and, recognition that you have received. But very quickly, you need to quickly come back to the user, because otherwise, yeah, it's then we won't be any different from chairman's message and our company's vision and mission and all of those things. So we need to make sure we get to the point. And the best way, of course, the user knows. The user can already see the tabs, or you can see the menu on your mobile app. The user can quickly go and sort of pick what they want. So for instance, again, if the user is very familiar, then the user will just simply go, connect, buy, or whatever, subscribe, or like, find out more pricing options, whatever else it is. But the point is, if you really want to create that connection with your user, then how do you show that you care for your user? Not by saying that these are all the pricing plans available. The best way to do that is content. And if you look at it, the world's largest professional network uses content. Do you think LinkedIn needs to write all these blogs? Do you think LinkedIn needs to do all of these things? They don't need to. I mean, they're the undisputable kings. There is absolutely no competition for LinkedIn. But the point is, they are trying to be helpful. The fact that when you go to LinkedIn, it's not just about a transactional arrangement between you and the platform. They are sharing useful content with you. So it becomes a part of your life, and you're more likely to convert. You look at Fitbit, right? I mean, they can talk about product one, product two, product three, band number one, band number two, brand number three, but no, they talk about body positivity. They talk about, how 5 big reasons to improve your cardio fitness, right? So they, it's important that you provide useful content where possible, right? Not everywhere, and there is a time and place for it. It should not be on the home screen when somebody comes and you're talking about your blog and you don't get to the point. No, so we have to realize when we are doing these things, and when it's essential and when it's non-essential, and when it's absolutely not needed. Now, this is obviously the world's best example of user-generated content, and a multi-billion-dollar company built on content, right? So people just come, they share content, and it just becomes such a great community, because that also brings a lot of community element to your web application or a mobile application, right? So because it's important that we create that, because otherwise there won't be any stickiness, and also it'll feel like it's a very transactional app. And eventually, if you want to lower your marketing spends and if you want the users to keep coming back to your application, then you have to provide them useful content also. So again, a recap: you started by evoking an emotion, and again, may not be necessary depending on your product category or your service category. Then you highlighted your strength through numbers. Then you actually showed people, how good you are through reviews, awards, other things, testimonials, whatever else it might be. You then share meaningful content or other ways to show that you really do care about the user, and this application is all about the user. And finally, when you've done all of that, you make sure that you convert, because some organizations make the mistake of just getting too carried away with one of these things, and they don't have the right call to action buttons at the right places. And so make sure that, again, so what I talked about is a user experience, a user journey from when the user comes, you know, to when the user actually places an order, or whatever your desired outcome might be. So it could be, subscribe to the mailing list. It could be, post something, share with your friends. It could be, contact us, book a demo, whatever else it might be, right? So make sure that, the user finally is able to convert. But while the user is there, and the user may not realize it, but we've really thought through this, and we have created this customized user journey for them, and they feel so good about it, but they don't know why they feel so good about it, because we've done our research. We have identified what the users are, and of course, who the users are and what the user persona is will define the kind of content, will even define the kind of awards that we will highlight, will even decide, what kind of numbers do we highlight, right? So for instance, if somebody is all about, if your end consumer is all about, you know you doing something positive for the climate, or let's say, for economic equality, or whatever else it might be. So you don't say, last year we did $6 billion in revenue. You talk about maybe, some thought leadership aspects of how you impacted so many lives. So again, it's very important, right? But if, let's say, your user group is all about, okay, how can I make money, how can I multiply money, how do I invest in cryptocurrencies and grow my wealth 6 times, 8 times, then the content would probably be, predictions for Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever else, or it might be, make it very easy for them to set up a wallet, start trading, whatever else it might be, right? So I mean, that was, very essential for web. Now for mobile, a lot of things are common. Some of the things we spoke about, and I will spend the next 5 odd minutes, talking about, some of the key differences to keep in mind. We did go through, like the things that we spoke about, uh, you know, the 10 practices to follow. They are applicable for both web and mobile, but there are some things to keep in mind, especially for mobile UI, right? And so these are some of those things. So obviously, I mean, if it's a mobile web, like a mobile website, then it has to have a responsive design. You'll see some of the large companies also, their websites are not mobile responsive. They don't load properly. Content is, not arranged properly. Now that's an unforgivable thing in 2021. It should not happen. It should be easy to follow. Very important, because don't forget, it's a smaller screen size. People are not that invested. People are not, they don't have a big screen to look at. They're not, there's that element of exploration and discovery is much less. So you have recognizable icons. It's very important to have icons, so rather than a lot of words. So, and again, recognizable means, because again, remember we spoke about the submit button or whatever else it is. So those are obviously consistency. But if you have, I mean, the minute I say a word, you will know which icon I'm talking about. So account, right? You will see that tiny little, silhouette, settings. You know what I'm talking about. So make sure that you use recognizable icons, and that is not the place to use creativity. I've seen some organizations getting it completely wrong by trying to get too creative with the icons that they use. Again, legible fonts, and of course, high-res images, rather obvious. The UX, some essentials to keep in mind. Again, a lot of things completely common, whether it's a web application or a mobile application, but some things to definitely keep in mind when it comes to, mobile UX. So one thing is one step at a time. I'll share some examples with you. Like, in the sense, very early on, you are asked to make a choice. You are asked to make a decision. So you cannot explore everything together. That element of discovery is not the same. You are doing one thing at a time, because that's all that the screen size will allow you. You create that distinction early. Less is more. Like I said, the 80-20 rule means that most people spend 80% of the time on 20% of the things, right? So that is very important. And that's why when you are building a mobile application, you have to make sure that you know what those 20% things are. What are those activities? What are people coming to your app for? So for instance, if you are, let's say, a trading app, people are coming for trading app, they're probably not reading that much of research reports. They're probably, there could be some less popular investment categories that, may be available. So if, let's say, if it's a restaurant booking app, most people are coming for to book a restaurant. Sometimes they may read some reviews, but if you want to have interviews with multiple chefs and food bloggers and everything, may not be that important. And so even if it's important, relatively less important. So you have to make sure that in terms of content hierarchy and priorities, that they less prominent than the 20%, which is the most important thing. Then it has to be ready for interruption, because mobile apps by the very nature are things that people start doing, and then, okay, oh, my bus is here, oh, my taxi is, oh, I got a call, whatever else it is. So there are a lot of interruptions. So the way the app UX should be is that people should not have to start the whole thing again. So let's say if you have a face ID, or if somebody is unlocking the app, then they should be able to resume. Because if they have to go through that entire process again, then the chances are that they will probably stop using the app, or at least, like we were talking about cart abandonments. In this case, it would be people would not reach that point. So reduce the cognitive load. Obviously, it's very important. So they have to absorb less information. It should not be an information overload. Already, all of us have too much of information in our lives. It should be tap friendly. Obviously, it should be easy to tap. So the buttons are obvious, clear, big enough, but not too big to, whatever. It should be tap friendly, and, swipe more and type less. Try to get your users to type as little as possible. The dating app example that I was sharing earlier is in the sense, if you can have a lot of pre-selected text, then they can just tap, 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 or they can just swipe, instead of saying typing, I want to do it, yes, no, all those things not needed. So for instance, do you agree with this? Obviously, you just tap, and then it goes the checkbox, and that's it. So those kind of things are very important. And I'll just share with you a few sort of examples, and I will what I wanted to share with you here is, and before we take questions, is basically, as you can see, right on top, you see, the Les Mall, or surprise egg, Red Mart vouchers. Very early, you make a distinction. And again, through icons, right? If you look at the bottom of the screen, again, it's all about icons. So if you look at any of those icons, I mean, other than For You, which may be a unique thing, feed, not so much, but messages, card, account, self explanatory. You don't have to use any imagination. So you have to make sure that you first create a distinction right on top, because if somebody is coming to use Redmart, then you shouldn't have to, go through a lot of things to discover that. And once you've clicked on that, you are taken to another, so what's behind door number one, and what's behind door number two, and what's behind door number three should be a completely different experience. But you have to present the doors to the users right at the beginning. We don't have to wait. There is no element of discovery here. It's very different. It's very different here, right? So for instance, the first thing that you see here is, this banner, the shop now and everything. And under that, you see the same things. You have the tabs and everything. But the fact is, it's not as obvious. The first thing is you see all the categories on the left. And so it's a completely different experience. You are exploring more, you find out a bit more, there's creativity, there is some banner, all those things. And if you look at LinkedIn again, why I said earlier that UI UX is all about the process that happens before you actually design, right? Because if you see mobile apps, there is a lot of standardized stuff. You look at the icons at the bottom, you look at, what some distinctions on top, wherever you want to go, and then you have content and whatever is more relevant for you, right? So if you again look at, completely different thing. So right, like here you see LinkedIn news, there are things happening. You can check the number of readers or whatever you may want to explore, you may not want to explore, whatever else it is. There is a lot going on here. And there is an element of discovery, because the screen size allows me, and because the fact that I have made the effort of typing www or whatever, and then I'm there, and I will then choose what I want to do. Whereas an app is a much more guided navigation, in the sense that, it sort of does a lot of things for you. tap, go into the section you want to go, and that's it. So it's a very limited experience, right? Again, going back to the image that I was showing you of the couple, which was looking at the sunset or whatever, they had all the time for discovery to get to know each other for the rest of their lives, right? That's not an app. That's a web app, right? That's not a mobile app. Again, if you look at it, just look at the sheer lack of content. Again, if you look at on the left hand side on the Financial Times app, you see all the, which is refresh, the icon, search, my FT, obviously, which is your saved search, and then of course home, and rather simple. And then you have very little content, right? At least on the first scroll. Then you can go down vertical navigation, you can explore more. And again, you see very little content. If you look at the same websites, very different, right? So you have a lot of articles. You look at the categories on top, right? So it just allows you so many different things, whether it's you want to check out the print edition, video, podcasts, headlines, business, tech, markets, or opinion, whatever. There's a lot of things. So there's that element of discovery, there's that element of storytelling, that exploration that would happen on the web as compared to on the mobile. And again, some like to end with this is, again, if you look at it, the distinction that I spoke about. So you look at these three apps, completely different industries. So one on the left is Flipboard, uh, probably the most popular content consumption app globally. You look at Grab, and you look at I believe this would be hotels.com, or it could be TripAdvisor, one of the two. Yeah, it's TripAdvisor. So if you look at it, if you look at the bottom panel here, at the footer, pretty much very similar. And if you look at it, most of them in some form or the other allow you to select where you want to go. So they create all these doors, you click on those doors, and then you say, okay, this is where I want to go. And then your experience is very different based on your choice. So there's less elements of discovery. But how do you arrive at these icons? How do you create that journey is based on how you define your user personas and what your user journey map is like. So these are, important things. And just before we head to questions, if you are interested, if you haven't been designing yourself yet, these are some of the popular prototyping tools you can explore, and some of them are quite useful. I'm actually working with some students. They are doing their apps, and so I recommended a couple of them here. My favorite here is Figma. I think it's quite user friendly, but again, a lot of them are quite good. So you can create your own prototype. It's rather simple. You can create a design prototype, and sometimes even before you go into the development stage, you can create a design prototype where you click on something, it goes to the next screen, then goes something. So you have like a mobile app. So we do that a lot. We create a design prototype, share it with clients, and then they share it with their stakeholders, and then we get a much better sense of what is it that they would like to do, what changes, where did the users get stuck, which parts were not intuitive. So those kind of things, try these out, and and I'm sure you'll have fun. So I have overshot, which doesn't usually happen, but I tried to squeeze in as much as possible. I mean, like I said, I usually do an 8 hour program, but I tried to do it. So please feel free if you have any questions. Please, if you want, you can type. If you want, you can, state your questions, whatever you prefer.
Thanks so much, Abby. So, as Abby mentioned, if you guys have any questions, do type it on the chat box, or if you wish to speak up your questions, you may just unmute yourself first and then um, ask your question to Abby. Thanks.
So, okay, a question is, the question is, okay, there are a couple of questions coming in. So one is, while we build our apps, how can we connect it to others? For example, Google Maps. So again, there are APIs available. So for instance, integrations are a part of life now. So the good thing about apps is that you don't have to build everything from scratch. There are multiple sort of integrations available. There is, API documentation available for most of the apps. So for instance, if you are building something, so we are building a food delivery app right now. Obviously, they don't need to sort of build the entire navigation GPS system from scratch. So all we are doing is just doing some integrations for them. It's a rather simple process. So in fact, now building an app is easier than ever, because whether you want to connect it to your CRM system, there are APIs available for that. If you want to integrate with payment gateways, so for instance, a lot of people get disheartened in terms of the amount of effort that it takes to build some of these products, but it's not that much. So for instance, some of the easier payment gateways like PayPal and Stripe can be integrated in a matter of a couple of hours, right? Sometimes in a matter of minutes. Some of the more complex payment gateways can take a bit longer. So Google Maps, again, very simple. To let you know, so Google Maps even allows $200 free credit. So if your usage is low, you don't even have to pay anything. I mean, don't quote me on this unless they've changed the pricing or something. But till very recently, that was the case, and so it's quite simple. So I mean, for any third party system that you want to integrate your app with, just go to your website or just Google the API documentation for that, and then it should be rather simple. In some cases, you don't even have to do API documentation. Like for instance, if you build something on, let's say, some content management systems or something, you can even use plugins. There are plugins available as well. So okay, another question: how effective are progressive web applications? That's, I think, one of the best questions, because the answer is we don't know. So progressive web apps are actually quite interesting. Basically, progressive web apps are web applications. So we have to see why. So we just built one, which is like, Bloomberg kind of a service, which meets Medium, which is the, sort of content app. So it's a combination of those two. Now we have to ask ourselves, why we are doing progressive web apps. So progressive web apps are useful in cases, where, for instance, you want to have everything on the web. So don't forget that on mobile apps, if you do through the app stores or play stores or whatever it is, you have to share your revenue. You have to share your revenue. If you have any in-app revenue, you have to pay the platform 30%. So a lot of companies don't want to do that, obviously. So what they do is, progressive web app is actually a halfway solution, in the sense you have a website, you go to the website, then the website will give you an option of saying add widget to screen. You add the widget to screen, and then it becomes an icon on your screen. So every time you sort of tap on that icon, it launches the app. So it's still pulling the data from the web, but the user feels they are using an app. So it's a good sort of solution for both the things, and you don't have to build an application. Although building mobile apps has become easier. In fact, for the last 3 years, most of the apps that we have built are hybrid apps. So you no longer need to build a native iOS or a native Android app. But I think in some business cases, progressive web apps can be quite useful, where that a lot of people would be comfortable going to the web in any case. So you should not build a progressive web app if you feel that all our users will access all of it through a mobile device. But if you feel half our users are going to be comfortable using it on a web device, and you want to make it easier for them, then in those cases, I think it can be quite effective. And a lot of actually financial, sort of news apps, and a lot of news apps have actually become progressive web apps. You may not realize. You think you're using an app or whatever else it is, but like when you see it on somebody else's screen, but actually they're pulling the data from the web. So they can be effective. Oh, one more thing I would like to add is, there are some cases where progressive web apps are not very useful. If, let's say, you're building something which is which involves heavy duty gaming, or like some really uh, deep functionalities or something, then they may not be that effective, because in order for progressive web apps to be successful, they should be able to pull data from the web quite seamlessly. And that data, a lot of it is stored on the app, and some of it is being pulled real time. So, but if it's heavy duty functionalities or something, a lot of, let's say, I mean, even videos are okay, but let's say gaming content or something which is a more heavy content, then it will have a bit of a laggy effect, and which will lead to not very good user experience.
Right. Any other questions for Abby?
Okay, I can see a couple of comment. I'll just want to just quickly. Uh, okay, the couple of comments and questions that I would like to just quickly take is that somebody saying that not everyone, would be using. Let me check exactly what it was. So yeah, yeah, so web applications, yeah, more people can access, but mobile it should be more personalized. So yeah, I mean, I'm so happy you guys are sharing your comments. I think it's important to understand again based on the user group which works better for your user groups. So for instance, uh, like we are currently building a recruitment app, right? So it's a combination of a web app and a mobile app. So although the job seekers would happily use the mobile part of it, but the employers, imagine somebody sitting in an office has to go through, let's say, 300 resumes every day. It's not a very good experience looking at it on a mobile screen. So sometimes in those cases we do a combination of a mobile and a web app as well. The second thing to keep in mind, obviously, as founders, is it's a lot more complicated and a lot more challenging to market a mobile app, right? So in the sense that it's easier to run SEO campaigns and SEM campaigns or drive traffic to your website, but it's difficult. It takes a lot of effort for you to get people to download your app, right? Because how when was the last time you downloaded an app, right? We buy a phone, we change a phone, we get the same WhatsApp, WeChat, Telegram, Instagram, banking, whatever, but we don't have time for new apps, right? Every day 500 companies are launching their apps, so that is another thing to keep in mind. No matter how much easier it might be for the user experience, but if you feel it's going to be difficult to market those apps, then that's also a factor that goes into uh, that should go into the decision making. And another question Namrata is asking is, with emerging technologies, do you think interactions with applications would survive for long? Well, again, a great question. I think, in fact, just before the session started, I was discussing with Emmanuel, and we were talking about how a lot of applications are now decentralized apps, right? So in the sense, so D apps will become popular, right? I mean, nobody knows where technology will lead us, right? Where we are today was stuff of science fiction 20 years back. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen with blockchain technology, with the rise of decentralized finance, which is the next big thing. Another trend I would like to talk about is the trend for NFT. So if you guys are interested in blockchain and things like that, you should go check it out. I think that's going to be the next big trend. And I'm not a you know not, I'm not very good with my predictions. In a sense that I'm not saying go and buy NFTs, but yeah, but the fact is NFTs are becoming popular. So you will see a lot of decentralized e-commerce. You will see a lot of NFTs for preservation of assets. It has implications for documentation, bureaucracy, governance, a lot of those things. So the answer is, well, apps will be in our lives in some form or the other. I mean, unless some technology comes that completely bypasses that, but the nature of the apps will be different. So from a very centralized ecosystem that we are functioning in, where whether it's Facebook, whether it's Apple, whether it's Google or whatever, we will live in a more sort of decentralized future. Is That's my uh, understanding. I could be wrong. Nobody knows. So okay, one last question. Uh, okay, how can what you shared be adapted for developing e-learning app and content? Well, again, e-learning is, the way forward. Again, like I said, there are a few things that I always ask people. So when they are, let's say, building an app, the first thing that I ask is, what's your marketing plan? And that's a bizarre question for us to ask. We are a development company. Uh, but the fact is, most of the products fail not because they were not good, but because either they fail because of bad UI UX, because functionalities you can get a freelancer somewhere anywhere in the world, spend a few $1,000s and get it done. But most of them fail because the UI UX is suboptimal. And the second reason they fail is because the marketing is not done well. And both have one thing in common, and that is again the user. So if you're building something for e-learning, make sure you understand who your user group is going to be and why is your user coming to you and not going to a Udemy or a Coursera or whatever else, right? So I'm not trying to discourage you. And I really do believe that, the world has enough opportunities for all of us to build thousands of apps. But we have to, if you can find that niche, if you can find that segment of users who will come to you, it could be because your users are different, it could be because your user experience is different, it because your programs are very different, you own that intellectual property, it could be a function of the business model, it could be the subscription model, it could be many things. So have answers to those questions, and I think you can definitely build a very successful e-learning app. So yeah, I guess that's about it. And for all of you thanking me, I would like to thank you. I think you've been very patient, and thank you for not dropping off and watching Netflix. so, so really thank you for that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Then yeah.
go ahead, Abby.
No, no, that's it. I was actually gonna hand it over to you. I believe you have some questions to ask. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Abby. So just before we end the session, we would just like to share a few of our few announcements from the club. Let me do that sharing. Okay, just a few announcements. First would be our upcoming event this coming 9th March. If you guys are interested to know what the future of data and blockchain would be, do join us on 9 March and register early as possible as this is a quite a hot topic. So if you would like to understand what data holds for us in the future, do join us. This is a event collaboration with Project Management Association of Singapore. So we would be glad if we see you guys again. Okay. And of course, our next one, as mentioned earlier, we are running a mini contest. So answer the question that we'll be giving out on the next slide, and you'll get a chance to win limited edition NTU Alumni Club face masks. So 3 participants will be randomly selected. So are you guys ready? So here is the question. So just place it in a chat box, then we'll select randomly and then we'll announce it later. Okay, the question is, which mobile app do you think has a good user interface and user experience? Okay, we'll give 30 seconds to everyone to give their answers.
Wow, that's a lot of apps.
Yeah.
That shows that we are so lucky to have so many wonderful apps that we use, right? And yeah, a lot of them have wonderful user experience.
Okay. Okay, 10 more seconds. All right. Okay. So while we do our selection of the winners, I will pass it over to my colleague who will share with you guys our CNY promotion.
Emmanuel, I'm Catherine here. Could you ask Abi, could you share with us a little bit about the course you conduct? Because you mentioned that you conduct a full day course.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I mean, so it's basically an extension of this program. The difference is that we actually get people to build a bit of a prototype using some of these prototyping tools. So, because as much as I've tried to squeeze in these 90 minutes, I think you'll get a hang of it when you actually start using some of these prototyping tools and build something. And we've seen that people are able to walk away, with like something that they have built. And I'm not saying obviously in a couple of hours that somebody would be able to build an entire app, but even if you have like a few screens of, let's say, an app you're trying to build, either a web app or a mobile app, and then if you and we'll show you the way to sort of connect it and everything, so it becomes quite interesting. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's and usually we do that face to face, so I'm not sure when we get back to that.
Where can we find information on that?
Well, I think we can work with you know Emmanuel and Christine and Frederick here, and we can organize one as and when everyone's schedule allows.
Okay,
Yeah, so and we can figure that out. Yeah,
thank you.
sure.
All All right. Over to you, Frederick.
Hi everyone, just sharing a quick opportunity for you to join the club at a promotion price of 888. Usual price is 1,200 for entrance fee. On top of that, you stand a chance to win a $180 worth of cash voucher. It's a sure win, but the amount varies. So this promotion is ending soon by the end of this month. So if you're interested, you can drop us a message or send us an email. We would like to come for a club tour. Right, passing on back to Emmanuel.
All right. So we have selected three winners. So it would be Shermaine Lee, um, Namrata Singh, and Sierra Sapendo. So for the winners, you'll get a limited edition face mask. So do stay for a while as we get your information and to let you know how you'll be able to collect your prize. Thanks. Okay, and then with that, we have reached the end of our program. We would like to thank Abby for sharing a very insightful sharing to everyone. And we hope to see everyone again at our future events. And we thank you for joining us tonight. And uh, thank you and good night to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Emmanuel, Christine, Frederick, and all of you for being so patient. Yeah, thanks. See you soon. Bye.